If there were any limited beliefs that I had going in, and I've dealt with a lot of that with plant medicine and journeying and meditation, this experience shattered these limiting beliefs and made me realize that all the limitations that we have are limitations that we put on ourselves. They're self-inflicted.
Welcome to Fatherhood Voices, Breaking the Toxic Cycle. Dive in as real dads bear all, the mess-ups, make-ups, and every heartfelt moment in between. It's raw, it's real, and it might just change the way you see family.
Hello and welcome to Fatherhood Breaking the Toxic Cycle. And today we're diving into a fascinating topic, the Darkness Retreat. This unique place allows people to spend time in complete darkness, offering a chance to reflect and learn more about themselves. Edward has recently experienced this retreat, and he is thrilled to share his story with us. Let's explore what he discovered during this journey. So, Edward, what made you decide to go to a darkness retreat?
I felt like it was the next layer of my journey to sit and go deep within myself without plant medicine, to really sit with my thoughts. And I felt like this was going to force me to deal, to confront my deepest, darkest critic, which was me, my inner critic. And boy, it didn't disappoint. It was intense.
Now, as we dive into discussing the Darkness Retreat, what were your initial expectations before you started this experience?
My expectations were to sit on, I looked at it as more like a meditation where I was going to go in and I had all these ideas and plans on. I was going to craft these marketing strategies for the Fatherhood Voices podcast. I was going to craft new initiatives and ideas for the real estate business. I was going to come up with new strategies for my investment properties. It was a lot, in my mind, it was going to be a lot of uninterrupted time to be able to go in and fine tune my business plans, to fine tune the different projects that I'm working on, to grab those aha moments that I would come out and I was going to be ready to execute on, on having the gift of time, no distractions of social media, family, the kids, work, clients, TV, nothing. It was just me with myself with a lot of free time to just dive deep into what the next layers of my journeys were for all these projects that I'm working on. Boy, was I wrong.
So, I take it that the retreat lived up to your expectations. Is that right?
Those were not met. Those were not met because what ended up happening was, when you're sitting in darkness and you lose sight, your other senses kick in, from the auditory. It just kicks in on a whole different level. David Boda put it on, and he brought in someone named Daniel Kish, who has been blind all his life, and he teaches blind people how to navigate in this world that we live in. And he was the first one actually certified to be able to teach blind people, because for the longest time, only sighted people could teach blind people how to maneuver through this world that we live in. So, which was kind of backwards, but that's for another podcast. It was intense. It was intense because I went in expecting one thing and I got something totally different. Imagine feeling like you're claustrophobic, like you're in a small box and you're gasping for air. Your anxiety kicks in. I've never had anxiety, but it kicked in. And the day before, when I went to this workshop, before the retreat, we did this 4-hour workshop in darkness to kind of start to understand what this experience was going to be about. And the whole time I was in darkness, I was gasping for air every 20 to 30 seconds. And what kept coming up was about a month before in Costa Rica, 2 months ago, me and two of my spiritual brothers got caught in a riptide, and one of them drowned. His name was Corby Waters. He drowned in the water, and panic set in because we got caught in this riptide. I was able to help one of my brothers and save one of them. His name was Rick. I couldn't get to Corby because of the riptide, the water. It was just a lot of different things. Not going to go into too much of the detail. But when I was in darkness that first night at the workshop, that's what kept going through my mind. is being in that moment of the riptide and gasping for air and the waves, us, and just struggling for air. Now in the water, it was the water that was preventing us from breathing, trying to stay afloat and so forth. But in the darkness retreat, it was struggling for air. So it's almost like PTSD came back. It got triggered after the incident, and then I worked through it. But it's like it came back again, but it came back at full force. And then you're in darkness, so there's nothing to distract you other than your mind and going back to that experience and reliving it over and over again. So I didn't think I was going to be able to go through with the retreat the next day. And 2 hours before the retreat started, so I was still 2 hours before the retreat, I still was questioning whether or not I was going to be able to do it because this horrific experience I had the night before. And I remember it coming up, and I started purging. I started purging out the incident in Costa Rica with the riptide and the almost drowning. Well, we did have a drowning, but of me drowning. And I purged it out, and I purged out what I saw and what happened and replaying it. And I was literally in the Target parking lot throwing up for almost 2 hours. And that was part of my purge to release that, so that when I did go into this darkness retreat, I had already dealt with that, which made it easier, because had I not purged that out and gone into the darkness retreat, I honestly do not feel that I would have been able to stay, because it would have just, the anxiety would have kicked in, the gasping for air, and I would have had to just tap out. So yeah, that was pretty traumatic. Just the start of the retreat.
Wow, that's impressive. Given that you're an extrovert, how did you manage the solitude during the retreat?
It was tough. It was tough because, especially the first couple of days when you had to sit in silence with yourself and you have no sense of time. You don't know if it's daytime, nighttime, morning, afternoon, evening. And from the time it started, you wanted that bell to go off, which was signaling the end of the fast, which means that you've made it up to Friday now. And, I'm sure if, like you needed rest, what I probably should have done is I probably should have deprived myself of sleep for like 2 or 3 days. So when I gone in, I could have slept through a lot of the fast, because it was just a fast with water. But my body's always been on this rigid schedule where I only sleep 3 to 4 hours a night. So trying to force myself to sleep in order to get to the break of the fast didn't work well. It didn't work well because I couldn't cheat time. Time went extremely slow. And for me anyways, I had all these grand visions of everything I wanted to work on. But what happened was, once my subconscious mind kicked in and you sat with a thought, that thought would not leave you for hours. And you would try to come up with a different solution, and then that thought would sit with you for, it seemed like hours. Probably was hours. And then you try to move on to something else, but that same thought came back. It wasn't until your subconscious mind, your inner self, was ready to release you from that thought that you were able to move on to something else. It was intense. I had some very deep, dark cries. Can't say I had a lot of laughter. They say sometimes you have some of your most profound laughing experiences. Mine was like pretty traumatic. It was fighting with my inner self, fighting with my subconscious mind to try to get out of this loop that I went into. And no matter how I tried to stop it, how I tried to shift it, it would not let me until I dealt with that pressing issue at hand. And then when I thought I dealt with it, then there were 1,000 other scenarios all over again. And it repeated itself. So it was rough.
Could you share some of the challenging thoughts you experienced during the retreat?
I definitely became, empathy set in for blind people. of how they have to maneuver through this world without being able to see and not understanding colors and having to rely on touch and the other sensories. So that really set it had an emotional toll on me. And empathy for people with disabilities. That was something profound that came up. Another thing that came up was if there were any limited beliefs that I had going in, and I've dealt with a lot of that with plant medicine and journeying and meditation, this experience shattered these limiting beliefs and made me realize that all the limitations that we have are limitations that we put on ourselves. They're self-inflicted. And it also made me realize that there's no materials or people or things that can bring you inner peace and happiness. It all starts from within yourself. You can try to supplement or put things in play to try to give you that inner peace or happiness. You know, new cars, new house, new relationships. But at the end of the day, it all starts from within. And that was a very profound moment that I realized. You know, I was journaling while I was in the darkness retreat. And I bought this spiral notebook. And I remember I would put my hand like this and I would write. And then I would lower my hand to write. So I wasn't writing on top of the words. And then when I'd finish my thoughts, I would fold the paper. And then I trained myself so that when I grabbed my notebook again, I knew that the folded side had already been written on. So I would now unfold, go to the back side, write again with my hand to not write over the words. And then I would fold it. And then, you know, so I had this strategy in order to capture some of my thoughts. And I got some pretty profound moments. But I felt like I was a war prisoner at one point. I went into this journey where I was a war prisoner and I was locked up in a cave in darkness and went through the cycles and the emotions, and it was tough. And then I reverted into a whole journey of being locked up in the shoe in Pelican Bay, where you're locked up 23 hours a day, but in darkness. And it was rough. It was rough. You know, they say sitting with your mind, with your subconscious mind, your inner thoughts are one of the hardest things that you can ever do. And I kind of believed it, but I didn't know the true extent of it until I was sitting there in darkness with my thoughts, and I had no control of being able to shift my thoughts because my subconscious mind was going to force me to deal with the issue at hand, and it was not going to release me until I brought closure to it. And then even if I dealt with it for hours, I would move on to something else, but then I would go back to the same issue again. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Did you encounter any mystical or psychedelic-like experiences during your time there?
I started to see some of the colors and so forth, but I was so stuck in my mind and these moments that it's almost like it cheated me away from the mystical part of it. You know, they say that DMT is released after the first 30 hours. And I experienced some visual, you know, some little bit of visuals, some color or some light, but I kept going back to my thoughts, which kept interrupting that part of the journey. And, you know, something that did happen that I guess I would say was mystical. There was a point where I went back into the womb of my mother when she was pregnant. And I got to experience from inside of her the trauma, the arguing, the fights, everything that was going on through the pregnancy. And over and over again. But feeling it from the perspective of a fetus, a baby, and just like when the yelling and the trauma was happening, it's almost like the exterior of her body was getting pushed in and I was getting like punched. And then I was moving around in the placenta or in her stomach and just taking a beating, an emotional and a physical beating. That went on for hours and hours and hours. It was rough and I couldn't stop it. I had no control of it. The only control I had was when it would get too intense, which was a lot of the times, I would close my eyes. Even though I'm still in darkness, subconsciously, I felt like I had a little bit of control. And that was by closing my eyes. And even though I was still in darkness, it was a choice that I made. Because when my eyes were open, I was in darkness. When I closed my eyes, I was in darkness. But at least me physically closing my eyes, it gave me a little bit of control over the situation. Because there was no control. I took showers, like to distract me in darkness. Try to maneuver through a restroom that you've never been through and trying to figure out the levers and the shampoo and the conditioner and the body wash and even using the restroom, doing it in darkness. Brushing your teeth. I can't tell you how many times I brushed my teeth, but it was ways to try to distract myself from my subconscious, because when you're just sitting there with yourself, it starts again. The mind starts working. So I would do these things to try to distract myself, because it was so intense that it was draining. And then what happened was, one of my purges had happened. By the first night, I was sick. Flu, chills, fever, coughing, and that's how my retreat went. I was sick all the way to the end when I had to leave a couple hours before, because it was just in the best interest, because at that point I was becoming contagious and my body had just it reached its toll. I was shivering, fever, it was tough. And that was my purge. And after the retreat, I stayed sick for almost 2 weeks, just still going through it. And I went straight out of the retreat. I went straight to urgent care. I got tested for COVID, bronchitis, strep throat. It was just a bad case of influenza or the flu, but like on an extreme level. And I had these grand ideas that I was going to come out of the darkness retreat with all these new epiphanies and ideas and strategies. Hell no. I came out wiped out and just trying to recover from what in a sense was a traumatic experience. But it was a traumatic experience because I was sitting with myself for all that time and forcing to deal with the most pressing thoughts that I was dealing with at that point in time in my life.
So, when you were doing everyday things like showering, all in darkness, how did you adjust to doing these activities without seeing anything?
You had to rely on memory. They gave us these walking sticks that blind people use. It was a big estate, so, I was in a room with someone else, maybe two other people, and there were multiple rooms. There was a study room, there was a library, a lot of rooms. So, first couple of days you're of course you're in darkness the whole time, but you're silent and you're waiting to break that fast. And it was rough because they don't move the furniture. If you needed to go get more water with electrolytes because you're on this fast, you'd have to work your way to the kitchen, to the wet bar, and you're literally with your stick trying to remember which wall goes at an angle, and then you're walking barefooted because you're trying to feel the texture of the floor. Oh, I went from carpet to tile. Oh, now I'm here. So you're trying to create almost like these memories to help you to maneuver through. And then if you do finally make it to go fill your water jug again, then it's almost like an eternity to come back because you're trying to find your way back to your space. And I remember almost making it a game because I was trying to waste time to try to just pass time. And sometimes it would take me hours to work back to my sleeping area because I'd make wrong turns, I'd fill a couch, and I'd sit there and I'd sleep for a little bit. But then I'd wake up and then my thoughts would start again. And then I deal with that and try to work my way. Maybe I get to another room, or maybe a couple times I'm back in the same room again, only because I'm going circles. But eventually I would make it back. Sometimes it seemed like hours. And the reference points that I created was where my sleeping area was, there was a dresser. So I put all my toiletries on top. My wipes, my sanitizer, my toothpaste. So the way that I knew that I made it back to my area was I felt the wipes on the dresser. And then my luggage, the handle that goes up when you're pulling it, I kept it up and at an angle. So if I veered away from too far to the left, at least I knew if I couldn't touch the dresser, if I felt a piece of luggage with the handle up, I knew I was back in my area. So there were a lot of adjustments I had to make to create like these reference points in order to find my area. And sometimes if I went on a mission of exploring, it would literally take me hours to go back. And actually, they gave us this in darkness, which is something that blind people use to help pass the time with their sensories. Okay, and this has like 4,000 or 5,000 different combinations. Okay, tell me, I don't know how, but I solved this like 2 or 3 times. I was able to bring it back into a cube. I had so much time. So this was a distraction right here that helped me get away from my mind. I forget what it's called. But literally imagine playing with this in darkness. So this is a tool that blind people use to help them with their sensories. I am not sure exactly. I have to reach out to Daniel Kish to ask him. But this right here, I'm in darkness and just trying to get it back to its shape. It's like a Rubik's Cube. And there's only one way to bring it back. And literally, I was so freaking... This was my only distraction in there. And then, of course, journaling when I had the energy. But this right here, like, helped to keep me sane. Because I literally felt like I was going insane. I was losing my mind. And I don't know how I solved this. At least 2 or 3 times. But I guess just through going through all the movements. Yeah. This right here was a godsend. And, I've kept it as a momentum or token to remind me of something I definitely don't want to experience again. So, at least at this point in time. So, yeah.
Along with the darkness, were you also in complete silence during the retreat?
For the first couple of days, yes. Through the fast. And then afterwards, you were out, you came together once the bell rang, and then you met up with the 18 other people in the retreat, men and women. And then you could talk and so forth. My thing was, at that point, I was already full bore sick that I didn't want to communicate with anybody. I just wanted to be in my little corner. I actually wanted to just be out of this experience because it was rough. Had I not gotten sick, it would have been a better experience. But you know what? Getting sick was part of the process. It was part of my purge. It was a way to release my inner toxins. It was my purge, but man, it was bad. It was bad. And then it stayed even after I came out the retreat.
So, regarding meals, how did that work? Did someone bring you food, or was there a different arrangement for eating?
No, so you would work your way. So after the fast broke and you had food that morning, you would work your way to the wet bar towards the kitchen area, and then they would give you a bowl, and I'm going to call it like a bowl of porridge or a bowl of mush. Hats off to the chef who did an amazing job of preparing these like healthy, organic meals, but you eat them with your hands. And it was different textures and an explosion of flavors. So you'd really have to tap into your taste buds in order to feel the explosion of different flavors. And it was almost like a porridge most days. One day, we had when we broke the fast, we had bone broth soup. It was just a soup to just kind of get the juices flowing again, and then we had like a porridge next day, and then it was almost like always like porridges or like.
So it was mostly like scooping.
Well, but there was no spoon.
Oh, so you had to drink.
You would drink or with your hands. You eat with your hands.
Wow.
Yeah, no utensils.
Now, let's talk about the practicalities. How did you manage basic tasks like using the restroom and maintaining personal hygiene in complete darkness?
Okay, so peeing just took a lot of strategy to make sure that you maneuvered yourself over the toilet bowl. So me being very like germophobic, having to touch the inner rail of the toilet bowl to know that I've positioning myself, and then kind of crouch halfway over the toilet bowl to make sure that I'm hitting the water and then you're bending over, and then try not to touch the water, but you're trying to make sure that you don't pee all over the floor. Took some positioning. And then fortunately, and maybe this was part of the fast, and then also the food that they gave wasn't like real heavy. I didn't have to poop in the restroom. But I did bring wipies inside the retreat just in case. But I did not have to. Oh, see, I almost got it, but I'm still short. But I didn't have to poop. So that was a good thing. So when I came out of the retreat, man, I had to go to the restroom. But I don't know how I would experience it. I would have probably used like 100 wipes to make sure that I cleaned myself, you know. There's a funny story Daniel Kish tells that when he started participating in these retreats, you know, with the last one last year, he didn't realize that sighted people, which are people that can see, need to look at toilet paper to see if they're done cleaning themselves. He said, you know, as blind people, we've never even thought about that. We just like, you know, their sensories are just at a whole different level. Their touch, their hearing. But he says, you know, as blind people, you don't even think about having to see. You wipe your butt and you know you're clean. But as sighted people, we look at the toilet paper to see if we've cleaned yourself or not. So yeah, it was a interesting moment, you know.
During your time in the retreat, were you exposed to any forms of entertainment, like music, for instance?
Yes. So on Friday night, we had like a concert. Okay, we all gathered in the living room, family room, library room. I don't even know what it was because never got to see it. And they played a vinyl record of Fleetwood Mac. Don't know which album it is. I'll probably have to mess it. And it was in vinyl form. And we had no sight. Our hearing was enhanced because we lost our sight temporarily. So the music just hit on a whole different level. You could feel the vibration. You could feel the sound. You could feel the acoustics of it. And we listened to the whole album, you know, in silence. And it was beautiful, beautiful. And then afterwards, they had a concert and they brought somebody in to play some live music. And they had sound bowls. And it was a beautiful Friday evening of entertainment and music to be able to just listen without any distractions of the sight. Although that was a profound moment for me, I just was not feeling at 100%. I was so weak and so emotionally and physically drained from catching the flu that I was just literally withering away on a couch off to the side somewhere. And there was a point where they did a group activity and held hands and stuff. I did everything I could to just hide off towards a corner and I'm just going to close my eyes, which it didn't matter because I was in darkness anyways, but I just used that as a time to just take in the music and just rest.
What are the main insights or lessons you gained from your experience at the Darkness Retreat?
You know, the two of the most profound takeaways was, one, there's no materialistic things. There's no person or place or anything that can bring you inner peace or happiness. That all starts within you. You know, I've heard that, I've understood that, but never to the depths of the level that it hit me. That your inner peace, your inner self, it all starts with you. Nobody can make you happy. Nobody can give you that peace. It's all you. So that was a very powerful moment. You know, the other one was being in my mother's womb. Did I share that? Did I share that already?
You did.
Okay. Being in my mother's womb and feeling that trauma. But the third thing was, here's two other things. You know, having empathy for, like I said, people that can't see and disabilities and so forth was profound. But even more profound was realizing that any limited beliefs that you have all start from within. Like this retreat shattered. If there were any limited beliefs I had, they're gone. They're gone. Like humbling yourself and sitting in darkness and then even sitting in silence and just realizing like A lot of us that are blessed with sight, sound, being able to move around, we have what we need to succeed. We have what we need to create happiness, to create. The limiting beliefs are all within us. And it shattered my limiting beliefs. If there was any last bit of remnants from journeys that I didn't deal with, oh shit, the darkness retreat, it washed those away. It's definitely brought back my confidence on a whole different level. It's brought back my gift of gab of just interacting with people and chit-chatting and just wanting to be that extrovert and just almost like being in gratitude that I'm out that experience, and knowing that limiting beliefs does not exist. It's all shit that we create in ourselves, or it's trauma that happens as children where we all of a sudden we believe we can't do things or we're not worthy. And it's all within ourselves. We have the ability. We are worthy. We can do anything we want. We just have to go out and do it.
As we conclude our podcast, could you share any advice or tips for someone considering participating in a darkness retreat?
If at all possible, if you're going to do the darkness retreat, and this is kind of, a lot of people go into it because they're sitting with heaviness or maybe trauma, or they're trying to get answers. Just know that if you go in with heavy thoughts or with very emotional issues, they're going to haunt you and haunt you. If you think you're going to have control over your thoughts and being able to, like it with plant medicine, people think they can cheat it. And maybe they don't want to deal with the darkness. You can't cheat your inner thoughts. And if you go in with too much baggage, and maybe that's not the right word, but just maybe maybe you're going in and you're dealing with, like a divorce or something. You're struggling to figure out, like, what do I do? That thing is going to haunt you for every second of every minute of every hour, nonstop, at 100 miles an hour, over and over and over again. So you have to be careful, because the most pressing things that are going on in your mind are going to show up, and they're not going to leave until you've explored every single outcome, every single way you've looked at. And then every time you come up with a new outcome, you think you're dealt with it, then it starts all over again. It's a repetitive cycle, over and over and over again. And it's almost to the point, like, I literally think, and I think there's been cases where you could literally lose your mind. You could literally have a psychotic breakdown because you're so deep in your thoughts and you're trying to get out of it, but you're just in a loop and you're going over and over again. And what enhances it is you're in darkness, so there are no distractions. The only distraction is you and your mind, and you're in it so deep that you can't distract it. Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. I did it. I did it. Wow. Okay. So 4,500 combinations. I did it. Pretty cool. Look. Wow. Yeah, I did it. That's so cool. It ended in, I actually fiddled it through.
Is that the final?
This is the final check that was my experience in darkness. And, I met people that have gone and sat for like 10 and 20 days at these meditation retreats, not in darkness, but just in silence. And they talked about these profound experiences. This one was definitely the next layer of the journey that I needed. Although it was rough, it was tough, it was difficult. I'll stick to plant medicine. I'll stick to ayahuasca because I know it ends in 6 or 8 hours. I'll stick to mushrooms because I know it ends after 4 to 6 hours, and all the plant medicines. But the darkness retreat, it just went on for an eternity. It went on for an eternity.
It's safe to say you're not going back.
At this point in time, I don't ever plan to do another darkness retreat. But that's what I said about plant medicine too. And look, I've now sat with it a lot of times. But as of now, it gave me what I needed at this point in my life. And probably the most profound thing is it shattered that final bit of limiting beliefs that I had. It just destroyed them. And I'm ready to go out and I'm ready to take on the world, and I'm ready to go and create.